Hello, my name is Arnie Herz, and welcome to my podcast, Habits of a Whole Heart on hmTv. And today, I'm very fortunate to have with me my dear friend, Shlomie Rabin. He is a renowned cantor and singer who is able to ignite people with the depth of his singing. And he's here to share with us the wisdom of singing and how it relates to the sense of wholeness. Cantor Rabin also has an agency where he helps other cantors and singers find placement, and we'll delve into that a little more deeply. And he's also created an organization called the Niggun Society, which he will tell us a little bit more about. And I met Cantor Rabin at the Chabad of Port Washington a number of years ago, where he was brought in to sing. And I was so deeply moved, my wife and I, and not just moved by the depth, but also incredible awe, because I think I was the only person in my elementary school that was cut from third grade chorus because I have such a terrible voice. So anyone who could sing, I'm incredibly impressed and moved. So Shlomie, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Arnie. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm reflecting now on one of those Shabbats when we were in Port Washington together when I came to serve as the cantor, and you invited me over to the Torah class at your home. And after the Torah class, which is more of a discussion, I love how you format it, open for people to share, and it's not just like top down, it's by the people, for the people. And afterwards, we sat down and we were discussing, what you're up to and your communal work, your activism, the book you're working on. And we talked about having this podcast as an idea of getting you exposure. And that was under a year ago. And here we are today. I understand this is the 30th episode of this podcast.
Well, this is over 20.
20.
I think this is the 20th or 21st podcast episode.
Unbelievable. And I'm honored to be here. And I got to be honest with you, this is my first podcast.
Oh, well, you're going to be great.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm grateful to be here and excited.
Thank you. So Shlomie, tell us a little bit about music and its relationship to spirituality, its relationship to wholeness. I know you're a very spiritual guy. You study Chassidus. And we should even tell our audience what's Chassidus. So just give us a quick overview of music, Chassidus, and how you see the spiritual world.
Yeah. For me, this is the fun part. The rabbis have to talk about, the Torah, the academia, the intellectual part, but I just come in and I get to make people feel good with music. So I have the easy work. That said, music is extremely spiritual. It's mystical. It's godly, and it's a direct shortcut to the soul. I find that whenever you come into a room, the first thing is you got to read the room. And why is that? That's because music is supposed to connect. And if you're not connected to the audience, then you've broken the first rule, which is it's about you, not about them. And so music inherently is about a connection of soul to soul. It's a soulful connection. It's not just we're shaking hands and it's an external one, but it's much more of an internal one and a mystical one. And so when you read the room, what that means is you're basically saying on a soul level, I want to connect with you. And I'm going to make sure that we're dialed in together. That's why one of the first things we oftentimes do is do an icebreaker. So I think we should do one right now, like an icebreaker song. Like, I don't know, maybe Haveinu Shalom, right? Like,
okay.
Haveinu Shalom Aleichem, Haveinu Shalom Aleichem, Haveinu Shalom Aleichem, Haveinu Shalom, Shalom, Shalom Aleichem. There you go.
Beautiful.
So a lot of times it's just about getting started and creating the foundation for connection. And that, I think, is what music offers. Music offers just a connection of soul to soul. And in a way that speech is limited, I feel like where speech ends is where music begins.
Beautiful.
It transcends language. It transcends cultures. It transcends religion. I feel like language is a unifier. Music is a unifier. And that's just the entry-level opportunity of music on a basic level.
It's fascinating that we're talking about music being a unifier across, beyond language. When we just studied last week's Torah portion in Parshas Noach about the Tower of Babel and how God confused everyone's language. And what I hear you saying is that it's the one universal language that everyone can connect to.
Yeah.
So Shlomi, you mentioned, you just used the word Shalom Aleichem, and I was thinking, what does that mean?
So Shalom Aleichem in general is, I mean, I don't even know the origin of the song, and I really should, because it's, but Shalom Aleichem just means peace upon you. And, when we think about inner peace, which is a little bit of the theme of this podcast, right? Inner peace and wholeness. You think about what creates division, what really creates division. And I think what creates division is Rabbi Simon Jacobson says, he says, what is depression in his definition, right? And the way I understand it is there's two types of depression. There's the clinical one, and then there's what every person has, right? I think every person has some, seasons of depression or elements of depression on some level. Maybe it's just inner conflict. We can use different words and mean the same thing. But I think that when we have inner peace, when we have inner wholeness, when we have inner completion, there's a certain stillness in our soul. And I think that's because we found the balance between the warring factions within us. The soul, the mind, the heart, the animalistic soul, the godly soul, our desires for physical and our desires for spiritual. And when that's in equilibrium and balance, there's peace. Then there's shalom. But oftentimes what's happening is there's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of noise, and we haven't managed to balance the two. And I think, this is early on in the podcast, but one of the things that is very meaningful to me is, we don't talk about artistic depression. And I think a lot of people look at the grandeur of artists on stage. They look at, cantors, singers, inspirational speakers, influencers, and they say, wow, look at what they have, right? And it's easy to see from the outside, and that's all you're being shown. You're being shown, the shiny object. But what's really going on a lot of times for artists is that they've been given a gift and a talent by God. And if you don't use your godly given talents, and this is across the board, not just in the music, then you're falling short of your potential. And when you're falling short of your potential, inherently that space that gets created becomes the place for sadness or depression to set in. Rabbi Simon Jacobson likes to say how, when you have that space in between, it's the depression or the sadness or the conflict is actually the body's way of telling you something's missing, right? The same way when you have a cold, it's your immune system saying, hey, there's something wrong. So depression or sadness or inner conflict is actually a sign of something's not in alignment. And I think for a lot of artists, when they're not using their talent and when they're not in touch with their God-given talent, they're inherently sad. They're inherently not giving off what they could. There's a Talmudic expression about the cow that wants to nurse. And the Talmud explains that more than the calf needs to feed, which is important, the cow must nurse. It's important for the cow to give its gift, to share its bounty. And I think that for music, it's an easily understood talent. Everybody knows it. Everybody, most people enjoy it. We'll talk about that later for the people who are the outliers and why. But I find one of the things I tell my cantors is that when you're in the synagogue, the first people to be your fans are the women because they're more emotionally inclined. So they love music faster than the men because it's an expression of soul. It's an expression of emotion. And that's the opportunity of music. Unlike, the rabbis who their job is to inspire through spoken word and through intellectual stimulation, the cantor's job is to inspire through song, through music, through prayer. And on that note, I just want to talk about prayer for a second.
Let me just jump in for a second and say that when you talk about if someone has a gift to give and they're not giving it, it's almost like your breath is being held and you need to exhale. And people don't realize that we're here for a purpose. And the purpose we're here for is to give that God-given gift that we've been given, that we've cultivated to the world. And so that's very, very important. I see that's what this podcast was, in wanting to bring the podcast into this world, wanting to bring a certain wisdom into this world to help other people, because that's what we're meant to do. We're meant to unify and bring that forth. And so later on, we'll get into your business of helping people take their talent and create business opportunities for them, not just for their own parnasa, for their own earnings, but also so that they can bring their gift into the world. I want to go back to the Shalom Aleichem because it's fascinating for me. So, as you know, I've been very involved with some global diplomacy with an organization called the American Jewish Committee. And as part of that, I've been to Morocco and have met with numerous leaders of the Arab world. And Shalom Aleichem sounds very, very similar to the words in Arabic about welcoming and creating a sense of peace. And
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. There you are. And you see how Judaism and Islam, how close those two religions are and have been, and how Judaism thrived for many, many centuries in the Arab worlds. And through the Abraham Accords now, bringing that back together and hopefully in part through song and mutual connection. And you were talking about the inner conflict is also external conflict. So when you're singing a song, not only you becoming whole within yourself, but the other person's becoming whole with themselves, and a whole being connects with a whole being, and it creates a sense of peace.
Yeah.
So what is it about music that you think transcends language?
It's a great question. It's a great question.
Has this effect?
You touched on a few things. I want to unpack some of them individually. So one is, on a global scale, ethics of our fathers, Pirkei Avot, one of the passages there is our sages tell us that the world stands on three pillars: Torah, the study of Torah; Avodah, which is the spirit of the heart, the service of the heart; and Gemilas Chasadim, which are acts of kindness. So the Torah, as I mentioned, is like the rabbi role, right? You got to study, you got to learn. And I don't mean the rabbi, not the layman. It's just that's what they do. And Avodah, what is Avodah? What is the service of the heart? We put on tefillin every day. Men are obligated to put on the phylacteries, the tefillin, one on the arm. Well, I'm a lefty, so I'm pointing to this, because we do it there. But one against the heart and one corresponding to our mind. And the idea is to subjugate both capacities, both opportunities of the mind, stimulating of the mind and alignment of it in a godly way, but also our heart and our emotions. And I think sometimes, at least in Orthodox Judaism, it's easier to get lost in the mind part of it, and sometimes harder to access and unlock the heart part of it. And it's sometimes easy to escape within ritual and custom and protocol. You go into a synagogue, there's a lot going on. I mean, you've got the prescripted text, you've got a bunch of laws pertaining to how things go down, you have a bunch of customs to how things go down. So where's the opportunity for individual self-expression? Where's the opportunity for you to show up in the prayers? And I think sometimes these are guided. It's a guidance, so to speak, but we also need to encourage ourselves within the service. And so when we talk about that middle pillar, Avodah, it's about serving God through our heart and finding where we feel the connection. It's not sufficient to understand God or to constantly try to understand God. We also want to feel the connection to God. One of the Hasidic masters would say that it's a huge mitzvah, it's a great commandment, or it's a great opportunity, liot besimcha, to be joyous. Why? Why is joy such a big tenet of Judaism, of Hasidic philosophy? I mean, that's another great song we should sing. Mitzvah gedola liot besimcha tamid. It's a great commandment to be full of joy, to serve God with joy. Mitzvah gedola liot besimcha. Mitzvah gedola liot besimcha tamid.
And wow, it's beautiful how as soon as you're done, there's like a stillness while you're singing. And what you were just talking about, I grew up with a version of Judaism that was very formulaic and disconnected from emotion. It wasn't until I learned about Chabad and I learned much about Hasidus and the Baal Shem Tov that there was a whole emotional aspect of Judaism. So, of course, in Judaism, we talk about the importance of thoughts, emotions, and actions. And so you're talking about this Avodah is the second core pillar that brings the mind and connects it to action. And this is, just hearing you sing is very, very beautiful. And having gone to India to study yoga and meditation for many years before I reconnected with my Judaism later in life, The stillness of meditation, which also had song is very prevalent, was that song was a technique of stilling the thought waves of the mind. And when the thought waves are still, the mind goes into a place of stillness. And in that place of stillness is a place of wholeness and serenity. And that's what I believe creates some of the healing. So curious to get your thoughts on that.
It reminded me of the story of the Cantor Rabin, the founder of the Chabad movement, where he went to a town hall style meeting with his critics, his opponents. His opponents felt like, you're introducing these new ideas into Jewish life, and I don't know if that's, sacrilegious. They weren't so into it. And, he said they had a list of questions that they proposed to him, mostly philosophical. Some were halachic. How could you? How's this in alignment? Isn't this in conflict of what Maimonides teaches, et cetera, et cetera? And rather than, address them one by one individually, he opted to sing a niggun, a melody. And I believe it was a wordless one. And the story goes that after that, all the questions were answered.
So what's a niggun?
A niggun is basically, loosely translated, I would say a niggun means a melody. Usually in the Hasidic context, it's most times a wordless melody. So instead of having lyrics, it's just going to be, ay, 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 something like that. And it's, we'll unpack that a little bit later, but just to address this idea, the Cantor Rabin addressed all their questions he stilled their mind. He quieted their mind with a melody. Kind of like, if you want to visualize it, it's like if your spouse is, kind of not balanced, or how do you say this? My wife might be watching this. But, if you ever have a time where things get a little bit crazy and you just go over to your spouse and you're like, do you need a hug? Right? And in that moment, the hug recenters everything. It's like whatever I was worried about and anxious about and nervous about and all up about, that hug kind of recenters you. That's how I visualize what Cantor Rabin did. Cantor Rabin said, listen, you guys are all nervous. You're nervous about the protocol and the ritual and what's allowed and what's not allowed. And you're like, listen to your body language. You guys are nervous, right? Okay, let's sing a niggun. Let's dial back and say, where does it all come from? Or what's it all really about? And in doing so, he unveiled to them that there's a lot more going on than just what's going on in your mind. And let's review the tenet of serving God with our feelings and with our joy. That's my interpretation of the story. And so, I think that the music does that because it's a soul thing. The same Cantor Rabin also said that music is the quill of the heart or the pen of the soul. So it's something that God gave us as a gift. And I think if you ask yourself a basic question, which is there room for music in Judaism? Like, is music godly or is it like sacrilegious? Like, should we be doing music in the synagogue? Should we be singing in our homes? Should we be singing on Shabbat when it's forbidden to use instruments? Should we be singing on Yom Kippur when it's the holiest day of the year and not having enjoyment? And I think the answer is it depends how you view music. You see, there's a difference between instrumentation and vocals. And you have to understand this distinction because it's important. Instrumentation, musical instruments have a place, and there's a time where that's forbidden. That's forbidden, for example, on Shabbat, we don't use musical instruments. It's forbidden during the times of mourning, if a person's, grieving the loss of a loved one, or during the global periods of mourning, for example, during the summer when we have the 3 weeks and we're grieving the loss of our temples, or during the Omer. Those are times where we say, look, music means pleasure, and therefore we're going to refrain from that. But in all of those settings, Shabbat, during the Shiva, Tisha B'Av, Yom Kippur, the Omer, we do sing vocally. And why is that? Because vocally means my soul never turns off. You like to say, I think that, Judaism is not just when I'm going to shul on Shabbat, right? It's all the time. So if it's all the time, then your soul is with you all the time. Instruments they're not godly. They express a godly thing through music, and they're in the musical family. But vocals are part of an expression of soul. And so therefore, they're on all the time. On Shabbat, we sing in the synagogue. And I've been at Shiva houses where the only way they cope is through singing. And you go to the Kotel on Tisha B'Av at night, and you see people sitting in a circle at the Western Wall, grieving the loss of their temple, but united in song. Because song connects us. It doesn't just connect us to ourselves, but it connects us to our fellow beings, and it connects us to our higher power.
Right. And I would argue that connects us to everybody else And it's also, songs can have tremendous depth of meaning. And of course, culture, music is so prevalent in all cultures, and how, it's, as you said, it's the universal language of what's spoken. I mean, one thing I'm thinking about is on Kol Nidre and Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, the song Usana Toka, where it has so much depth of meaning of realizing how precious life is. One of the big inspirations for this podcast was my own close brush with death when I had a brain bleed 3.5 years ago and didn't think I would make it through the weekend. And I said, if I could survive this, I would want to come out and really give 110% every day to bring the light that I have. And so I live life with a certain intensity, but awareness at the same time that we take for granted every single moment, and how to really bring forth the essence of the moment and take advantage of it. As you were saying beforehand, as we were preparing for this, boy, these questions go deep. And one of the things that I talk about is that most people are like living on a boat, looking at the surface of the water, and not realizing there's a depth beneath them. And one thing that I've realized in my life is that there's a tremendous depth, and that's what I love about music, is that it takes you beneath the surface to a different realm. And so I don't know if you'd be up for singing that Usana Toka, or a couple of lines of it.
Sure.
Because I think it's so powerful and poignant, not to make people depressed, but to wake people up to see how blessed we are to be here in this moment, and to think about what is most precious that they want to express today in their life and to their loved ones.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're reminding me of, it's not that long ago we celebrated the high holidays. And I just remember there was a moment breaking down, and the rabbi looked at me and he's like, what happened there? And I think it was in the middle of the prayer for the Chayalim, for the Tzahal, for the IDF. And it's just, there's so much emotion that's packed up. And when it just flows over, I encourage cantors to try to maintain their emotion, because they're more of a facilitator to elicit emotion of the crowd rather than lose it on stage and kind of, I encourage people to keep it together and then use emotion to elicit emotion from the audience. Let them feel that and express it. They can bubble over while you kind of facilitate that. So that's usually encouraged. But when you think about these themes, like, the people who are giving up their lives for the Jewish cause, for the Jewish people, for morality, for humanity, and then similarly how fragile life is in and of itself. We don't know if we're going to make it to tomorrow. We don't know if we'll make it to celebrate another Rosh Hashanah. I was telling my wife the other day, I said, how many Sukkots do we get to celebrate in a lifetime? 80, 90? The first 20 were kids. We don't even appreciate life. So when we go through a calendar year and we mark one of these events, there's 50 left? So now we're now to 49? Like, it's not infinite. Life is sacred and precious. And so, yeah, we can sing a part of that.
I just want to say on that point, it's not like when I go through this contemplation, it's actually very energizing, because one of the things I saw during those days in the ICU was everything I thought mattered didn't matter. And everything I thought didn't matter actually mattered. Everything was just turned on its head. And by doing that, I've been able to infuse my life with so much more meaning. Like, so much nonsense. You talked about the noise. Music brings you below the noise, but so much of the nonsense I was able to let go of. To this day, I see myself getting caught up in this small thing or that, let it go. And stuff that's essential, telling someone how much you love, to forgive, to help someone who's going through a difficult time, or someone who's not going through a difficult time, just needs a little bit of mentoring. In each of those ways. And you're really waking me up to seeing the depth of music a little bit more. And I do want you to sing a few of the stanzas from there, but I want to taunt my audience, because we're going to do a second episode with Cantor Shlomie Rabin, because we're going to end up this first episode, because we're coming to our end right now. And I want everyone to please tune in for the next episode, which is going to be more music, and we're going to bring out a number of really key important points that we have not been able to cover yet. So, Shlomie, thank you so much for being on this first episode, and for your first podcast and your first episode. You were absolutely fantastic. And I want to say shalom and thank you very much.
Ose shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'yimeru, yimeru, amen, yimeru, amen.
Thank you so much, Shlomie. This is Arnie Herz. Thank you for tuning into podcast Habits of a Whole Heart with Cantor Shlomie Rabin. And we are going to be doing another episode with him right now. So please stay tuned. This is hmTv as part of the Humanity Matters series. Thank you very much.